You ever spend hours crafting a villain that your players just didn't care about? Like, seriously, you built the lore, you create the epic encounters, but your players online are just still doom scrolling TikTok. Yeah, that was me too, and I'm got sick of it. I'm gonna be real. So, if your players don't lock in when you introduce your villains, stick around because I've got the perfect solution to make your players obsess over your villains, even if you're terrible at storytelling. Actually, especially if you're terrible at storytelling. You see, my name is Sensei Suplex, and I'm a professional dungeon master who, over the past 7 years, run about 4 games a weekly D&D for a living. I do this full time, and I'm building a giant MMORPG universe where players can drop into high-stakes, story-connected sessions without scheduling headaches and dozens of DMs wanting players just like you. But let's talk villains. See, years ago, I made Emperor Zhao, literally one of the MMO universe's most hated villains ever. I had dozens of different players despise this guy across multiple groups that spanned over years. So naturally, I tried bringing him into my latest game, but I ran into a wall. Zhao was level 17 to 20 and my players, well, barely level 2 and 3. So I thought about using another villain, this old king from a campaign 7 years ago. But let's be honest, nobody even remembered him and I had to kind of build this villain from scratch. Keep him alive for multiple sessions and somehow make sure that the players actually hate him. And here's the kicker. I wasn't even good at long-term storytelling. See, my improv-heavy rule of cool DMing style, while fun, really sabotages my storytelling. My plots often lack depth, and my players typically aren't that emotionally involved enough to stay engaged. Players were losing interest. My session attendance was dropping. Then I realized something big. Maybe, epic backstories weren't the solution. Maybe cool visuals and epic personalities actually weren't the move. Maybe player investment was rooted in something simpler, something deeper, their backstories. See, that's what every other YouTuber would say. But you see, my name is Sensei Suplex and I'm a certified dumbass. The real answer is pettiness. Yeah, you heard me. Pettiness and a sprinkle of spite. That's when inspiration struck. Drawn directly from one of gaming's most petty companies, gaming's best systems ever, in Shadow of War's Nemesis system. And that's how the Rising Rivals and Ascending Ally system was born. You see, anytime an enemy downed a player and got away, they became a rival, stealing abilities from the characters that they defeated. Players instantly got invested, motivated purely by revenge. This turned my biggest DMing weakness into one of my greatest storytelling strengths. So here's the story of exactly how it changed my game forever. And hey, if this type of gameplay excites you, I'm not just sharing this for kicks. I run a massive living D&D universe called Project Aurora where you can actually jump in and experience this system firsthand. There's dozens of DMs, evolving storylines, and systems just like this one, changing how D&D is played forever. So if you want to play in a D&D game for the first time or play with a different group of people into video games, anime, comics just like you, check the link in the description and join us. Now, back to the breakdown. So, if you're trying to implement the Ascending Allies and Rising Rivals system into your game, class is in session, break out the pen and paper, and it's time to take some notes. Yeah, I know. But because throughout this entire video, I'm going to be explaining exactly how to implement it. So you see, the system can be implemented at any game at any point within the campaign. However, I'm gonna be real, it works best if you kind of implement it at the beginning of the campaign, so you come up with lore reasons on why this is happening to begin with. And from what I've learned, it also works best with 2 groups of players in my experience. Either players who love storytelling and narrative because it naturally creates plot from player choices, or more combat-focused groups. You see, because they enjoy tactical challenges and end up fighting versions of themselves who are buffed up. 2 groups on extreme sides of the spectrum. And the cool part is, all groups in between will love aspects of it even more. So we're going to be talking about rules-light narrative-focused groups versus heavy, crunchy mechanical groups. So if you're running this narratively, here's what I would probably do. I would keep things simple. Just note down who downs a player and escapes, right? Note down the weapon and the feature that they take and reference it later. One thing to note is that you're not taking features from players and you're not taking weapons, you're more so duplicating them. Next point, don't just emphasize, but overemphasize the enemy's personality and grudges. Your players should instantly tell who this guy is when they see him, just like in Shadow of War. Beyond that, let them evolve naturally in status and story. But if you're running this more mechanically, that's actually what I did. Here's what I would do. So do everything the rules light people are doing and all the next stuff I'm about to say. What you're gonna do is you're going to also assign clear tiers to your enemies or your sort of faction that the players are going against. This is what I did. So I had the tier of boss, then I had captains right above bosses. After that, I had legionnaires, then I had royal guard, and then I had the king's right hand because they were attacking the kings and his forces. Next, Each escape means increased stats, so like proficiency bonus, HP, and their ability scores to affect their 2-hit modifiers and their damage. Here's what I did. I could do this on the fly because I'm just used to nerfing and buffing my encounters on the fly anyways, but for stat proficiency bonuses, I would just increase it by 1. So if it was 3, then it would go to 4. For 2-hit modifiers, I'd increase that typically by 2. And for damage output, I would typically add another dice of damage. For HP, I'd add roughly 10 to 30 HP, and I would kind of play it by ear. And I would increase 2 of their highest stats by 5 each. So if their dexterity was a 13, it now becomes an 18. If their constitution was a 12, then it now becomes a 17. And again, you just kind of adjust to however you want your table balanced. I don't know exactly what works best for you, so that's going to be a decision for you. This is just what I did specifically. You see, when I introduced this, I thought I was a smart cookie. I'm gonna be real, y'all. Because on Foundry, it was a simple couple of stats I could change on the fly, taking at most 20 to 30 seconds. However, I shortly realized that I am in fact not Cookie from Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide and ran into a big issue. You see, I made my players hate my rivals a little too much. Yeah. And you see, it was to the point that rivals were either hunted down too quickly or they leveled up too fast and became unstoppable way too soon. You see, I had a hierarchy system in my world for my faction because every faction has a hierarchy in D&D. I mean, it's just typical. Well, not everyone, but you know what I mean. However, I'm gonna be real, it was impossible to track this crap in the heat of the game, and some rivals just spiraled out of control quickly due to D&D's death spiral mechanics. And on top of that, because players knew rivals could get strong or super strong and super fast, they'd kill them as soon as they became a rival, essentially curtain calling all of my villains. And I'm gonna be real, I struggled at first juggling these complicated numbers and rules mid-session. Players sometimes got frustrated or they even got overly confident, and it kind of ruined the emotional impact I was going for. So I personally ditched the rigid numbers and just played it all by ear. I simplified it. If an enemy downs someone, they're just stronger. If they escape afterwards, they're even stronger than that. And critically, I made sure rivals had limited but significant appearances, keeping players hungry for revenge. And I want to just note, this is kind of why I think the Ascending Allies and Rising Rival system is so cool. I didn't need any more mechanical bloat, but another DM may want it for their own games for consistency. So to illustrate the two extremes, again, I did 2 things. The first thing that I did was, we have to tackle how enemies actually level up. All right, for my rules light people, here's what I would do. I would track loosely. Trust your gut based on players' reactions like I did. So if your players are literally shitting bricks about the new enemy, lean into it and level them up more in the hierarchy. If they're not worried, maybe level them up a little bit less. Build rivals slowly and keep appearances sparse but meaningful. The more invested players are, the less you have the rival physically appear, and the more you have his actions appear throughout the game. So players could basically hear that this goblin just destroyed a farm that was really relevant to the players and their backstory. But the goblin isn't necessarily there. You'll have more instances of this in your game, the higher or more invested or engaged the players are into killing that rival. And when you have an enemy the players are less invested in, then you do the opposite, allowing them to get killed sooner or become a bigger bad even sooner. Here's the mechanical approach. Clearly define each level up and possibly associate abilities, mechanics like legendary actions or resistances exclusive to certain ranks. Use clear stats increases like I mentioned before, like proficiency bonuses, hit points, and damage outputs. The second thing we need to address is how to keep your enemies alive. So I had a thing similar to Mordor where they would come back to life after being killed. However, in D&D, revivification isn't that common. So we need to come up with a story reason on why this was happening in the first place. The main thing you as a DM or whoever's interested in the system need to figure out is death. Why do people keep coming back? Or specifically, how come every time an enemy is reduced to 0 HP, they come back once more at least once? The second thing you need to figure out is, how come whenever enemies down your PCs, they gain abilities and grow stronger? The third thing you need to figure out is, how many times can an enemy come back? So here's how I answered each one. My players are in a setting called the Phoenix District. The district is empowered by a phoenix whose life essence has connected to pretty much all living souls within the realm. Though people feel the violent effects of dying, they are revived back shortly after, forever losing a piece of themselves. The enemies, however, they had drank from a king's chalice, or the king's chalice, a magical artifact that gave them enhanced strength and speed, effectively turning them into vampiric super soldiers as they drink the king's blood from said chalice. In turn, whenever an individual was unconscious, the enemies could take advantage of their vulnerability and duplicate, not steal, their powers and defining traits. See, I mixed and matched this, but ultimately followed the monolith route and played it by ear. Monolith is the people who made Shadow of War. Essentially, the more times you interacted with the rival, the higher chance they are to come back and hunt you down region to region. See, when my enemies died, I personally only let them come back maybe a max of once, maybe twice. Well, if they earned it and the last time they died wasn't too much of a satisfying conclusion. That is for the player or the enemy arc as rivals. So now, you see, I had ran the system for a while now and I thought I was a big shot. Life was good, right? I thought of it all. My games were popping and I thought I was some kind of badass who could finally stand next to some of the legendary DMs in Aurora. And you know what? So were my enemies. They were confident, they were cocky, and they thought that they were untouchable badasses. And if you know the saying, Billy Badass was a badass until someone else comes along to beat that ass. So, you see, rivals alone weren't really enough. Players started to fight fire with fire. They wanted allies who could grow and evolve just like their enemies. They started recruiting NPCs and allies to join their side. And you know what else you guys can recruit? A like. Was that subtle enough? My editor told me that I should ask people to like the video. So I'm just gonna sit here awkwardly for 10 seconds and probably run an ad until you like the video. So yeah, go on. Go on. See, they like the video on Twitch. I said go on, motherfucker! So, the players wanted allies, and now suddenly managing both sides became overwhelming. How could I balance the rise of allies, well, without overshadowing rivals? Well, I'm gonna be real, I kinda just couldn't. Sorry. Allies quickly outnumbered rivals. See, players started collecting NPCs like Pokemon, emotionally investing so much that it threatened to become almost NPC wars, rather than players versus rivals. The solution? I introduced real risk. Allies can permanently die with no death saves. Suddenly, every battle mattered. Every choice about deploying allies carried weight, and players began carefully strategizing as they were emotionally attached but cautious. For my rules light people, so allies, they evolve through key story moments or player decisions instead of killing. Second part, you're gonna wanna make their personalities as distinct as enemies. You're gonna wanna ensure that you brutalize players when they die, like The Walking Dead, to force meaningful and emotional impacts. Make it visceral to tug at emotions. But also, allies might help out in more ways outside of combat than just in combat, so don't forget about that. For mechanical people, and this is what my players kind of preferred, allies can kind of gain abilities similarly to rivals, but only through deliberate player actions. Also, allow sending allies on missions, assassinations, or scouting, gaining new strengths, or possibly even dying in the attempts. And finally, tracking became its own beast. How did I keep all this organized without going crazy? Well, at first, it was messy. Names, abilities, and events were scattered everywhere. Almost impossible to keep coherent. It was a lot of work, but I mean, hey, it was fun at least, right? You see, my first attempts were chaos. Details were lost and villains were pretty much forgotten, and it was missed opportunities everywhere. So I streamlined the entire process and made a clear template. Tiers, stolen abilities, how they died, and their visual traits reflecting those deaths. Everything was neatly tracked in OneNote, simply organized and effective. Also, I actually have a video of OneNote on my channel when I cosplayed as the dungeon master from the cartoon. I look awful, but the video is good. So go check out that video if you want to learn how to plan effectively in OneNote. So for my narrative rules like people, here's what you're gonna do. You're gonna keep minimal notes. Focus on character, motivations, and big moments. That's pretty much it. For my mechanical people, you're gonna want detailed logs of stats, ability stolens, specific interactions, and visual evolution for immersive impact. And a quick tip, once a rival gets really strong, it's gonna be a nightmare to track all of their abilities. This happened with Lucky Fang and a couple of other people. I recommend when you get to that point, you just combine stolen abilities. So instead of having Divine Smite and Sneak Attack, you basically homebrew an ability where whenever he has advantage on an attack, he just combines both. And you just kind of adjust the damage numbers to make it fair, obviously. Then we got to the final part, the legality of everything. Yeah, I know you guys thought it was coming. I just did a little bit of research and honestly in 10 minutes, I just realized that the Nemesis system is actually only patented for software and video games. So D&D's not a video game and it's not software. And there's no AI generated systems to determine things. We just roll dice, dude. We just roll this. That's it. So yeah, I mean, you can look up the patent. It's literally just for video games. And on top of that, Assassin's Creed, Odyssey, I'm gonna be real, dog. They just stole the Nemesis system and just made it 10 times worse because it's You know who made that game. But yeah, so the cool thing is that you're actually able to use the Nemesis system, or more so the Rising Rival system that I've made in your D&D games, because a lot of this stuff is just basic D&D tips that you've probably heard from any how to make a cool villain video on the internet. This is just more so a concise video telling you exactly what I did for my own D&D game. So in conclusion, the Rival and Ally system transformed my D&D games, making each session emotional, strategic, and memorable. So whether you prefer narrative simplicity or mechanical depth, this system can revolutionize your game too. Here's some things I didn't include in this video, but if you want me to make a second video, comment Rival in the chat. So there's fortress and base building, assassination contracts and spies, player death and revive mechanics like Hades, raids and large-scale warfare, battlefield actions to make boss fights epic, and personality creation and story building for enemies. But hey, listen up, y'all. If you ever create a villain as hated as Emperor Zhao or Lucky Fang, prepare yourself. Your players might never forgive that enemy, but trust me, they're never gonna forget them either.